What if I told you that President Donald Trump's Arctic dream just slipped through his fingers? And the one who snatched it wasn't China, Russia, or even the EU directly, but Canada? That's right. As Trump shouted from the podium, "We will annex Greenland one way or another." He believed he was rewriting the rules of Arctic dominance. But behind the scenes, Canada was already making its move. Quietly, strategically, and with powerful European backing. By March 2025, two Canadian mining companies, Greenland Resources and Amarok Minerals, secured a landmark $3 billion deal with Greenland's autonomous government, Denmark, and the European Investment Bank. This strategic agreement granted them the rights to develop rare earth and gold deposits across Greenland's untapped Arctic terrain. Almost overnight, Canada became the key external power shaping Greenland's mineral future, leaving the United States on the sidelines, despite its loud ambitions under President Donald Trump. So how did Canada pull this off while Trump was still making bold promises? During his November 2024 victory speech, Trump vowed to complete the goals he left unfinished in his first term. Among them was one particularly audacious idea, to bring Greenland under U.S. control. Though previously ridiculed for his 2019 offer to buy the island, Trump revived the idea with renewed intensity. Within weeks of re-entering the White House, his administration reopened two Cold War-era documents, the Arctic Gap Identification Protocol and the Thule Radar Belt Modernization Draft. These files explored legal routes for the long-term U.S. control over Greenland, either through leasing or bilateral agreements with Denmark. But Trump wasn't interested in diplomacy. On March 4, 2025, in a fiery speech to Congress, he proclaimed, "We will get it one way or another." He was backed by Defense Secretary Pete Schiesse, who argued that Greenland's northern coastline created a radar-blind zone, potentially enabling Russian submarines to evade U.S. detection. Yet, many observers believe the real driver was economic, not strategic. Greenland is home to an estimated 38 billion tons of rare earth minerals, including graphite, zirconium, and niobium, along with 17 billion barrels of Arctic oil. These resources are critical to everything from clean energy infrastructure to high-tech military systems. Trump's allies in Congress, including Senator Josh Hawley, championed the narrative of economic national security, warning that China could exploit the region if the U.S. did not act fast. But Greenland had no intention of becoming anyone's resource colony. On March 12, 2025, Greenland's coalition government, Denmark's parliament, and the Royal Danish throne issued a joint declaration rejecting any attempts to compromise the island's sovereignty. Their statement went even further, warning that U.S. coercion could undermine NATO itself, a serious threat given the alliance's foundation on mutual respect and sovereignty. While the U.S. pursued unilateral pressure, Europe moved strategically. The EU's Critical Raw Materials Act, passed in 2023, required 25% of rare earths to come from trusted, sustainable partners. Greenland saw an opportunity: align with Europe, preserve autonomy, and attract long-term investment. This is where Canada entered the scene with perfect timing. Greenland Resources, a previously obscure Canadian firm, gained traction in Europe due to rising demand for molybdenum, vital to steel manufacturing and clean energy. Backed by European Investment Bank funding and collateral from Denmark's Export Credit Agency, it won a 30-year license. Shortly after, Amarok Minerals revived the dormant Nalunak gold project. With funding from British pension funds and momentum from the London Stock Exchange's AIM market, Amarok was approved to restart operations. In just weeks, Greenland had launched a new resource development era, partnered with Canada and Europe, not the U.S. While Trump made speeches, Ottawa quietly won the Arctic game. The financial web underpinning Greenland's transformation into an Arctic powerhouse tells a larger story, one of subtle strategy, shifting alliances, and power plays that extend far beyond raw numbers. The initial $45 million investment in Greenland's mining projects may seem modest in geopolitical terms, but its composition reveals deeper currents. With $9 million coming from Denmark's IFO, $6 million from a Norwegian sovereign wealth fund subsidiary, and the balance supplied by private equity from the UK and the US, the message was clear: capital was moving faster than policy. American money was quietly backing Canadian mining ambitions in Greenland, even as Washington's political elite plotted ways to pull the island into its strategic orbit. In a stroke of media brilliance, the Toronto Press published a graphic titled "Canada's Arctic Hexagon." It sketched out a chain of developmental and military infrastructure stretching from iron mines in Baffin Island through missile-equipped Elmir Island, into the NASA CSA Joint Spaceport on Devon Island, and ultimately ending in Greenland. The diagram highlighted the growing importance of this Arctic belt, not only for minerals and space operations, but for geopolitics. Where once the Arctic was frozen in both climate and diplomacy, now it was heating up, politically, economically, and literally. This hexagon had traditionally been regarded as a buffer zone, strategic but underutilized. Yet under Trump's renewed push to assert control over Greenland, the corridor began to hum with activity. Canada, originally open to greater U.S. presence in the region for mutual defense, started to rethink its stance. Trump's aggressive stance on annexing Greenland threatened to set a precedent that could one day put Canadian Arctic sovereignty at risk. In response, Canadian and European leaders sought to blur hard geopolitical boundaries by investing heavily in Greenland's economy, transforming it from a target into a partner. The international fallout became visible at the Vilnius NATO summit. Denmark found a staunch ally in Norway, both resisting any unilateral U.S. ambition in the Arctic. Poland, a reliable Trump ally, stayed silent. Canada took a firm but measured stance, reminding fellow NATO members that sustainable resource extraction must be free of coercion. France stepped in decisively. President Macron sent funding via development banks to support Greenlandic infrastructure, while the French Navy dispatched the nuclear-powered Suffren submarine to monitor the region, a gesture meant as both reassurance and deterrence. Back in Washington, alarm bells rang. The U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, focused on boosting domestic EV production, had omitted Greenland as a potential supplier when rumors circulated that Greenland might export its molybdenum, a key component in high-strength alloys and hypersonic tech, to Europe instead. Defense contractors like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon warned of delays and began scouting for alternative sources in Chile and Australia. These strategic oversights gave Canada and Europe an edge. Ottawa moved swiftly, establishing the $3.1 billion Arctic Green Transition Fund, co-managed with the European Investment Bank and Norway's Wealth Fund. Excluding U.S. institutions entirely, the fund signaled a quiet but powerful shift in Arctic leadership. Greenland itself asserted sovereignty through legislation. The infrastructure falling law passed in July 2025 required that 70% of all mine workers be Greenlandic locals and 10% of profits be funneled into a future fund. Canadian companies readily agreed, seeing long-term stability in local partnerships. In contrast, U.S. firms balked, reinforcing Greenland's pivot toward the Canada-Europe axis. Meanwhile, legal risk for U.S. unilateral action mounted. Any aggressive move against Greenland could trigger NATO's Article 5 due to Denmark's membership. Realistically, the Pentagon's posture remained symbolic. Aircraft exercises, radar access requests, and flag landing drills, but nothing concrete. Behind closed doors, even U.S. intelligence feared backlash from allies. Canadian firm Cedar Energy was already in talks to build a floating LNG platform near Disco Bay, offering Europe a non-American Arctic energy alternative. For Germany and others eager to end dependence on U.S. LNG, this was a golden opportunity. Trump's bold plan to claim Greenland has effectively backfired. Instead of falling under U.S. control, Greenland has emerged as a joint innovation hub, carefully nurtured by Canada and Europe. The U.S., for all its bluster, finds itself on the sidelines of a game it thought it could dominate. In this new Arctic order, Canada plays the quiet strategist, skillfully weaving diplomacy, sustainable resource policy, and regional partnerships into a framework that excludes coercion but amplifies influence. Where the U.S. brings pressure, Canada brings patience. Where the U.S. talks of ownership, Canada speaks of stewardship. And Greenland? No longer an island for sale, but the beating heart of Arctic geopolitics, guarded not by a single superpower, but by a coalition invested in its sovereignty, environment, and future. The power now flows not through Washington, but through Ottawa and Brussels. What's your perspective on this unfolding Arctic power play? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. To stay updated on new videos, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching.